Rayburn. Watley sat and watched his wife Jolyn make a scene on the dance floor of the community hall. Everyone was watching her. For 6 years, he had been dreading the possibility that this night might come. Of course, he wanted a lot of things. Jolyn was a beautiful, energetic woman. For 6 years, their social life had been limited to what they could do together or with their two boys. There were no parties, no social gatherings, no socializing with friends or acquaintances. Frankly, they had very few friends to socialize with. Rayburn Watley had several reasons for insisting on this strange arrangement. First of all, he was extremely jealous, and Jolyn attracted arrogant boys. She was different from the girls back home in many ways. She knew how to groom herself and dress in the latest fashion. She was educated and sophisticated, yet fun and playful. She was also a great flirt. That's where the problem arose. Why would a jealous man marry a woman who likes to tease and flirt with everyone he meets? Rayburn kept his wife on a short leash. Their son Brian had just turned 5, and Tyson was almost 4. Taking care of them in the household was practically a full-time job. Rayburn tried to make things easier by taking everyone out as often as possible. He was constantly bringing home gifts for his wife, trinkets, flowers, and candy. He had once read in a magazine that such things would keep the little woman satisfied, and that was all he wanted. Tonight's dance was a corporate dance. Rayburn worked for a small, family-owned construction firm. He worked hard and kept to himself so he wouldn't get in trouble. Yeah, trouble. That was the second reason he was so keen not to attend social events. He was born and raised in Rockingham County, Virginia. It was the extreme western part of the state, and if you walked another half mile, you would be in West Virginia. He had 3 brothers and a sister, and he missed them very much. His oldest brother, Thompson, was currently in prison. His sister, Nadine, and 2 younger brothers, Grayson and Fletcher, still lived in the area. He hadn't seen any of them in over 6 years since he was forced to leave, which brings us back to the second reason. Thompson was in jail for beating a man so badly that he spent 2 months in the hospital. Rayburn lived and worked 2 states away from home for the same reason. Thompson and Rayburn had a temper and fought like banshees when they were aggravated. When the first blow was thrown, neither of them felt any pain or what could be called mercy. The only way to stop them was physical restraint. Nadine was the same way, but seemed to control herself a little better. The 2 younger brothers were the most common. Everyone teased them for having a different father, which their mother didn't like. Rayburn's mother lived with Nadine, who was married to a truck driver. He didn't come home too often, and many people understood why. Virginia and West Virginia authorities were waiting for Rayburn to come home to capture him. It didn't matter which of them was lucky. In any case, the same fate awaited him as Thompson. Rayburn sat quietly in the back of the room watching his wife. Jolyn danced and joked with all the men, married and single. She was a coquette and enjoyed every minute of her free time. Too much time had passed. She missed the parties, the dancing, and the fun. She was glad Rayburn had taken her along, but resented him for not doing it more often. She was on edge, making up for lost time. It had been a good night for Jolyn. As the night wore on, things got looser and looser. Rayburn watched as the boys began to slowly fondle his wife. It seemed they were testing to what limits they could reach with her. For the most part, she held them back and was good-natured about it, most of the time. Benny Cordetti was one of the co-owners of Brightbill Enterprises. He was a loud, arrogant goon whom Rayburn disliked but tolerated because he was the boss. It was important not only to make a living, but to keep a low profile. As the night waned, Benny began to get more creative and adventurous with his hands. It was a slow dance, and Benny had both hands around Jolyn's ass. She didn't protest and just kept dancing as if nothing was happening. Rayburn clutched the empty, long-necked bottle as hard as he could, but there was no way it was going to break. Jumping up, Rayburn hurled the bottle across the room directly at his boss. Fortunately, it hit Cordetti's shoulder, and not Jolyn's. The force of the blow was enough to make the large man fall to one knee and start cursing. Jolyn turned around just in time to see her husband grab his partner and start dragging him across the room. He got into position to start beating the asshole who dared to grope his wife, but never got around to it. The 3 guys grabbed Rayburn and pulled them away from each other. "What the hell are you doing, you idiot?" shouted Cordetti, picking himself up off the floor. "You touch my wife again, you fat bastard, and I'll rip your head off. We just danced. We danced all night. A lot of guys danced with her. Yeah, but none of them felt her ass while they were doing it. I had no problem letting people dance with her, but I won't allow it any further than that. You crossed the line. You're crazy, Rayburn. You're a psycho and a drunk. And to top it off, you're fired too. Come in tomorrow and get your last check. Kick that bum out. Jolene stood with her mouth open. She had never seen her husband in such a state. She had no idea what had caused all this. Up until now, she had envisioned him as a caring, loving husband. She'd noticed him getting a little upset when she flirted, but never anything like this. In 6 years, Rayburn looked at his wife for some encouragement, but saw none and was escorted out. 10 minutes later, he was home. He paid the babysitter and laid down on the couch. He wasn't drunk. He knew he was better, and he'd had enough to drink overnight. He sat in the dark living room. The only light came from the kitchen. He realized that someone had given his wife a ride home when he heard the car door slam. He didn't look to see who it was. Was it Benny? Thank you for making this night unforgettable. I've never been so humbled. Thank you so much. She tossed the pack on the chair and noticed her husband didn't say anything back to her. Did you hear me? Are you awake or are you so drunk you can't think straight? I'm fine. I see you made it home. No thanks to you. Rayburn didn't feel like arguing with her. He was sitting here because he didn't want to be in bed when she got home if she did. By the way, I gave you your job back. Come back tomorrow as usual. What the hell did you do? Did you fuck him so he'd give me my job back? As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted saying them, but it was too late. Hell no. I gave him a blowjob so he'd give you your job back. I fucked him because I wanted to. Jolene was beyond furious as she slammed the bedroom door shut. Her words hurt him more than anything else in his entire life. He realized she was furious, but she had no idea what kind of demon she had let loose. Rayburn spent the night in his truck. After eating breakfast, Rayburn began waiting in the company parking lot for the payroll office to open. Waiting was bad, because it gave him time to think. He replayed the events of the previous night over and over in his head. He always stopped when he got to Jolene's confession or whatever it was. Hell no. I gave him a blowjob so he'd give you your job back. I fucked him because I wanted to. He watched as Benny Cordetti drove up in his black Cadillac. Damn, nobody drove those anymore. Finally, feeling that everything should be ready to go, he went inside. The payroll girl seemed hesitant to write him a check, but finally did. Before he left, he signed some termination forms regarding medical certification and tax information. Rayburn breathed a sigh of relief as he walked outside, but he was too late. Hey, Rayburn, what the hell's going on? Benny looked even bigger and pudgier in the daylight. Didn't the old lady tell you? It's all right. I took you off the fire. Rayburn waited as he walked toward him. Several of the workers had stopped what they were doing and were staring in their direction. I'm sorry this whole misunderstanding happened, Rayburn. I'm sure everything will be fine from now on. We all look forward to having you and your wife at our parties more often. Benny Cordetti was looking at Rayburn Watley with a wide grin on his face, and that was a mistake. Benny was a full foot taller than Rayburn and weighed at least 60 pounds. But none of that mattered. The big man was on his feet longer than Rayburn expected. Finally, Rayburn felt, or rather heard, a few ribs crack. This caused Benny to drop to one knee. The steel-toed boot quickly snapped the kneecap that was in front of him and dropped him to the ground. Benny's exposed gonads were the next target, and when he rolled onto his back to defend himself, Rayburn was immediately on his chest. Most of the blows landed on Benny's face. One of the missed punches broke his collarbone. The sharp pain in his right arm caused Rayburn to start using his left. By the time several workers pulled Rayburn away from the battered body, Cordetti's face had turned into a bloody mess. Two of them ended up on the ground, and then they all let him go, and he went to his truck. A few people were helping Cordetti, but most of them looked at Rayburn with awe. None of them had ever witnessed such a sight. Brian and Tyson were playing in the yard when he got home. Rayburn opened the door and whistled. In a flash, both boys were in the truck. Rayburn watched in the rearview mirror as Jolene stood on the back porch and screamed, waving her arms. Tough shit. An hour later, they were on Highway 81 heading south. The boys were eager to have lunch at Mickey D's, but they started asking about their mother. Rayburn tried to change the subject by telling them about the good time they would have at Aunt Nadine's. Rayburn stopped by Nadine, who immediately sent him to Fletcher. He had just gotten married and rented a house that was twice the size he needed to make his new bride happy. She had a 4-year-old son from a previous marriage, so everything worked out well. Fletcher and Grayson worked in Arlington. They usually left Monday morning and returned Friday night. It wasn't the best situation, but it was a good, steady job. Nadine and Fletcher's wife, Garnet, spent most of the evening with Rayburn. Nadine had a lot of free time and was going to drive down to Pennsylvania and pick up all the clothes and toys for the boy. Rayburn laughed when she volunteered so quickly. If anyone could handle Jolene, it was Nadine. She was mean, tough, and nasty as hell. Rayburn could never understand how she managed to get a man to marry her. He thought she must have intimidated him, or he had a wooden leg and couldn't escape. She wasn't amused when he talked about it. Nadine insisted that Roger had married her because of her looks and pleasant character. Then she always laughed at her own joke. She left at first light and reached home by lunchtime. "Who the hell are you?" Jolene still wasn't dressed. It was obvious she had been crying. "I hate to say it, but in this case it's true. I am your worst nightmare." "Oh shit. What now? I can't take it anymore." Nadine watched as Jolene walked slowly into the living room and sank down on the couch. "I'm Nadine, Rayburn's older sister. I promise not to hurt you, but I won't put up with any nonsense either. Understand?" "No, I don't understand." "You are in my house and you are not my master. As long as you're in my house, I'll do and say whatever I want. I don't care if you like it or not." Suddenly, Nadine realized why Rayburn had married this woman. She looked like a Barbie doll, but she had balls. She couldn't understand how she and Rayburn hadn't beaten themselves to death over the past 6 years. If any woman talked to Rayburn like that, he'd punch her in the face, whether she was a woman or not. Apparently, Rayburn never gave this woman any slack. "Jolene, do you have anything we could eat for lunch?" "I haven't had breakfast today." "Yes, come into the kitchen. I can whip something up real quick." "Would you like some coffee?" "I'd rather have a Coke if you have one." For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Nadine sat, Jolene served, and then sat down. "Where the hell is my husband? Why do you care? He is my husband and he has my children." "Where are my children?" "With your husband. They are safe and having a good time." "Where the hell is it? This is my house. Stop playing cute word games with me." "They live in Rockingham County." "Why?" "Because if he had stayed, he probably would have killed you." "Why the hell does he want to kill me?" "Because you cheated on him. No Watley man would tolerate that." "Hell, I can't understand why you're here now." "Oh, damn. I realized I messed up as soon as I said that." "Stupid, stupid, stupid. Do you want to explain that? Do you want another Coke?" "No, but I'll have some coffee now." Jolene poured 2 cups of coffee. Nadine brushes off the cream. "When I got home from the damn party, I told Rayburn that his boss was humbled and that he still had a job. When Rayburn made some smart-ass remark about me screwing his boss to keep his job, I hit the ceiling. I was furious. That he could even think such a thing was beyond me. I did the only thing that came to my mind. I gave him a smart-ass answer. That's what got me into trouble." "What the hell did you say?" "I said I gave his boss a blowjob to get his job back, and that I banged his boss because I wanted to." Nadine took a sip of hot coffee. "I'm surprised he didn't kill you right then and there. You must be a real blonde, because that was the stupidest thing a woman has ever said to Rayburn Watley. Really stupid." Jolene didn't answer anything. What happened that got Rayburn fired in the first place? All night I acted like a student at a frat party. I could see that Rayburn was upset with me, but I was having so much fun that I didn't want to stop. I was doing one last dance with Rayburn's boss, Mr. Cordetti, when the situation finally got out of hand. Cordetti put both hands on my cheeks. I told him to remove them immediately, or I'd kick him in the balls so hard he wouldn't be able to walk for a week. I didn't want to make a scene. But I was too late. Before we knew it, Rayburn had thrown a beer bottle at Cordetti and hit him in the shoulder. I think he was aiming for his head. That sounds like my brother. One thing led to another, and in a fit of rage, Cordetti fired Rayburn on the spot. Rayburn ran out before things subsided. I spoke to Mr. Cordetti for about 10 minutes, and he admitted that it was a bad move on his part, and that Rayburn was justified in what he did. He said he could keep his job and apologize to me. He also asked me to apologize to Rayburn for him. I didn't have that opportunity. "So you never had sex with that Cordetti guy?" "Hell no. There's no way I'm thinking about cheating on Rayburn." "Why did you say that?" "Because I was furious. He just accused me of being a slut. I wouldn't tolerate that kind of shit from anyone, including him. Before I knew it, my mouth was spewing all that shit, and there was no way to take it back. The only person who got banged that night was me. I did it to myself. Me and my big mouth." Jolene gathered up the empty cups. She seemed to be crying, or at least her eyes were watering. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't. Do you have any suggestions? You seem to know a lot more about Rayburn than I do. Did you know he's wanted by the law in 2 states? "What? No, I didn't know that. What the hell did he do?" "Damn, girl. That's a dumb question. What did he do to Benny Cordetti yesterday morning?" "Oh God, no. Cordetti won't be out of the hospital for at least 3 weeks. This is the Rayburn we all love and adore. For a few minutes, both women sat in silence. He can't come back here, can he? No. He can't stay there either? That's right. What the hell are we supposed to do? What do you mean, we? You're not among Rayburn's favorites right now. Oh, shit. He doesn't know the truth. There's no way he knows what really happened. Shit, I'm in trouble again. Look, Jolyn, it was very interesting to meet you. I enjoyed the lunch and conversation, but now I need to get the baby's things and hit the road. Can I come with you? Hell no. Are you trying to get me killed? May I have your phone number? I can handle it, but don't expect me to take sides. Rayburn is my brother. Blood comes first. We have money in the bank that we've been saving to buy a house. Rayburn needs money? I can get it for him. He's fine. He's with his family. He doesn't need anything. Hold on to that money. You might need it. 2 hours later, Nadine was on the road, heading south. She had to be home in time for dinner. In the evening, there was a big family gathering. Nadine told Rayburn what Jolyn had told her, but he didn't believe it. Until she proved otherwise, he would assume that what she had said first, in the heat of anger, was true. The story she'd told Nadine was a far-fetched cover-up. The main problem was what he should do next. He couldn't stay where he was, and he couldn't go back to Pennsylvania. Fletcher had a friend who owned a company that built yuppie log cabins in Winchester, Tennessee. A quick phone call, and one problem was solved. Garnett was going to keep Brian and Tyson at his place until Rayburn found a place to live. Garnett was making great grits. Nadine was going to bring them over, help Rayburn set up the house, and find some babysitting for the boys while Rayburn worked. Rayburn wasn't going to leave until Monday morning, so he had a whole weekend to spend with his family. Although Rayburn tried his best to get home without anyone finding out, he failed. Someone recognized him, and it didn't take long for it to be known. It never reached the ears of the law, but it did interest several people. Rayburn Whatley was a local legend. Anyone who wanted to be a badass could make a quick reputation for themselves if they overpowered Rayburn. It was like westerns about young gunslingers challenging the more experienced ones, only this time there were no six-shooter pistols. Besides, Jolyn Whatley had spent all day driving to find her husband and deal with him. The longer she drove, the angrier she got. By the time she reached Rockingham County, she was furious. The Whatley family set up in the house with plenty of cold beer and 2 grills with ribs and hamburgers. The plan was to remain inconspicuous and enjoy the weekend. All was well until the first phone call. Fletcher answered the phone. When he hung up, he laughed, attracting everyone's attention. Damn it, Fletch. What the hell's so funny? Nadine was the first to enter the conversation. He chuckled slightly before he spoke. Danny at the Grist Mill bar said there was just a pissed-off blonde woman there, demanding to know where she could find Rayburn Whatley. Apparently she's been going around all the bars trying to find her husband, and is being very loud about it. He said she seems to be acting obnoxious on purpose to lure you in. Nadine, does that sound like something my wife would do? Nadine couldn't keep from laughing. Damn right. She'll make a fuss until she finds you. I think that woman is in love, Rayburn. I think she's crazy. You know very well that the law will find out about this, and then we'll be in trouble. The tone of conversation around the table was mixed, but almost everyone thought it was funny. That was until the next phone call. They all watched Fletcher until he was done, and then waited for him to tell them what was going on. Rayburn, remember a guy named R.B. Griffith from Page County? Yeah, a tough guy who lived east of Luray. My good brother. He is looking for you too. And it looks as if your wife and R.B. Griffith will be in the same place at the same time tonight. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Finally, Rayburn stood up and rested his long neck on the table. You all must excuse me for a few minutes while I go in search of my loving wife. Fletcher and Grayson didn't want to miss anything that was about to happen, but Rayburn gestured for them to sit down. He indicated, however, that he wanted Nadine with him. He saw Jolyn's car in front of Wet Willie's. He parked in the back, and he and Nadine walked through the side door. It was a Saturday night at a country honky-tonk, but you could hear a pin drop if you didn't count 2 people chatting in the middle of the dance floor. Jolyn was standing nose to nose with R.B. Griffith. Of course, he had to bend over a bit to get his position even. R.G. Griffith was large and fat. Being overweight could be an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on how one looked at it. Rayburn and Nadine slowly stepped closer. Everyone froze in place, waiting to see what was about to happen. If you lay a finger on my husband, you miserable piece of shit, I'll rip your balls off and feed them to my dog. Rayburn laughed to himself, for they didn't even have a dog. Tell you what, little lady, after I'm done with that scrawny runt you call a husband, I'll come back and show you what a real man is. It was like 2 kids in a schoolyard. They continued to do this for over a minute. It was obvious that Jolene wasn't the least bit afraid of the asshole, but it had to end eventually. Rayburn moved a little closer, and Nadine stayed close to him. RB leaned closer to Jolene and grinned, whispering something to her. Big mistake. Jolene smacked him on the head, but hard enough that he turned his head, closed his eyes, and pinched himself on the bridge of his nose. It wasn't hard enough to hurt him, but it was annoying and embarrassing. Before he could open his eyes, he reached out and grabbed what he thought was Jolene's blouse. After a second, he realized he was holding Rayburn's shirt. The surprise on his face was immediately replaced by a satisfied grin. The second headshot was much more difficult than the first. R.B. Griffith was on one knee, and the first real blow had yet to be thrown. The smirk was gone, and blood was flowing in rivers. Nadine took Jolene aside as Rayburn put a steel-toed boot right on RB's left kneecap and then started throwing punches. It was over in less than a minute. Rayburn wasn't able to do much damage to RB's ribs and torso due to the amount of body fat, but he had plenty of other areas that caught his attention. He only stopped beating his opponent when someone announced that the sheriff had just arrived. Rayburn exited through a side door as the officers entered from the front. The confusion in the room made it difficult for the officers, and he had no trouble escaping. Nadine took Jolene home with her, but took the long way home. She didn't know what Rayburn's intentions were, but she didn't want to rush him. By the time they reached home, Rayburn had packed his things and was on his way to Tennessee. Jolene was furious. Nadine, on the other hand, thought the whole thing was funny as hell. It took Jolene a few weeks to realize that Rayburn wasn't coming back. A couple more weeks, and she guessed where he was. One morning, she just disappeared. Nadine called Rayburn to let him know she was on her way and in a bad mood. Jolene left the boys with Fletcher and Garnet when she left. Rayburn and Grayson tried to keep a low profile while they lived in Winchester. They hadn't become hermits or anything, but they had slowed down a bit. Nadine showed up a couple days after she called. No one knew anything about Jolene. While Rayburn and Grayson were working, Nadine visited all the local clubs and honky-tonks to see if Jolene had shown up there. It had been several weeks since she had left. I found her. Nadine looked quite pleased with herself. Would you care to initiate us into this? Rayburn looked more excited than pleased. She lives in a trailer park near Belvedere with a biker named Osman. They seem to be very attached to each other. She's very open about looking for her. She goes a lot of places, but their favorite place is a bar called the Monkey Barn. Osman works as a trainer at a gym in downtown Winchester. He considers himself a badass and a biker, even though he's not affiliated with it. That's good to hear. But what am I supposed to do now? Brother, you're going to have to talk to her someday. And you better do it now. Grayson placed 3 long necks on the table. Rayburn, Grayson, and Nadine sat off to the side. The Monkey Barn wasn't that big, but it was crowded. They didn't try to hide, and it worked for them. Jolene showed up with a big guy who must have been Osman. He was big and strong. No beer belly on this guy. She was all over him, which tended to piss Rayburn off. After 10 minutes, she finally noticed him, and her attention shifted to Osman. Now that she knew he was here, she was doing this to aggravate him. And it was working. Jolene looked over to the bar and grabbed 3 beers. Osman just stood at the other end of the room and watched her walk toward him. Well, if it isn't my husband and his loving family, it's a surprise to catch you here. She set a beer in front of each of them. What do you want, Jolene? Why do you insist on following me even though you know I don't want you? You know what I want? I'm your wife. I want us to be together again. You and me and the kids. That's what I want. If that's true, what the hell are you doing with that biker? He's not a wishy-washy kind of guy. He's a real man. I needed a place to stay while I looked for you, and he had a spare room. I suppose you share his bed too? Rayburn took it as a question. It's none of your dog's business. If you were fulfilling your duties as a husband, it wouldn't be necessary. For a few seconds, no one said anything. How are my children, Nadine? Is Garnet still taking care of them for me? But there was still no response. Finally, she got angry and went back to her new friend. It was quiet for a while. They decided to finish their beer and leave. They saw everything they wanted to see. And that's when everything turned to shit. As they rose from their chairs, Rayburn seemed to stumble. He was a little agitated and had trouble walking or even standing. Nadine and Grayson didn't notice this. He was still agile, but not as agile as usual. They never made it to the door. Osman bumped into Rayburn as he walked by, and the next moment he was already punching him. Nadine and Grayson were completely confused. This had never happened before. Rayburn didn't fight back. Osman beat him until he fell down, then started kicking him with his legs. Finally, Nadine got into the fight to protect her brother. Nadine looked over and saw a smiling Jolin. Jolin was actually laughing as she and Osmain jumped out the door. Grayson insisted that the hospital perform a full toxicology analysis on his brother. There was no doubt that he had been drugged, and the police were immediately notified. The injuries turned out to be quite serious, and Rayburn spent 5 days in hospital. The police never found Osman or Jolin. Rayburn and Nadine returned to West Virginia so he could recover. For some reason, local law enforcement on both sides of the state line didn't bother him. Exercise was never a part of Rayburn's life. His zero-fat physique and muscular figure were natural, complemented by hard work. Now things had changed. Nadine quickly realized that therapy and exercise were essential to Rayburn's recovery and made sure he was getting both. Fortunately, there were no serious problems. Within a few months, he was back to normal, or even better. He was ready to go back to Winchester when they got the call. "Grayson, what's going on, bro? A little news I thought you might be interested in. It seems that Osman and your wife left for Sturgis this morning. They are traveling on his motorcycle, so I imagine it will take about 3 days. They were there in Winchester?" "No. After the trouble at the monkey barn, they moved to Chattanooga. That's why we couldn't find them. He was bragging to some old friends in town, and that's how I found out about their trip." "What the hell was he bragging about?" "The beating. He claims he's the only one who could take Rayburn Watley." At this point, Nadine intervened. "I'll have the truck packed and ready in an hour. Rayburn, drop the boys off at Garnett's and be back here in 10 minutes, no more. We've got a long trip ahead of us." It took them exactly 24 hours to cover the 1,600 miles. Nadine managed to get a room in Deadwood. It was close enough for what they needed to do. It was simply impossible to compete with a crowd of 500,000 people. They spent most of the first day sleeping and recuperating. They had no idea where to begin their search or how to conduct it. Since most of the city was closed off to all traffic except motorcycles, they had to walk almost everywhere. Nadine thought it was funny, but it made Rayburn angry. They had spent 10 hours searching the first day, but had gotten nowhere. The second day did not start any better. They decided to split up and keep in touch by cell phones. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when he found Osman. He and Jolin were partying in noisy company in the middle of a crowded beer hall. He called Nadine and let her know where he was. Rayburn watched his wife and her new man for about 10 minutes and then slowly made his way through the crowd. If he tried to start something inside, he would be quickly stopped. He had to take it outside, where he would have a chance. He was already 10 feet from their table when Jolin saw him. "Oh, shit!" All of their table mates turned around to look when she shrieked. Rayburn wasn't that big and not that unpleasant looking, but he had everyone's attention. Osman toppled over his chair trying to get up. He began to squeeze through the crowd, trying to get to the door. He had at least 30 feet to go. Jolin crouched down and tried to become invisible. It didn't work. Rayburn followed, but he was in no hurry. Osman threw one last glance over his shoulder and sprinted out the door. He hadn't heard the siren or the squeal of the ambulance's brakes when it hit him. Ambulances and fire trucks were the only exceptions to the rules of the road. Nadine arrived just in time to see him get hit. By now, there was a commotion, and Jolin didn't immediately find herself kneeling next to her escort. The medics immediately attended to the problem, but she was still looking around the crowd for Rayburn. Then she noticed Nadine beside her. She had to make a choice, and she slipped through the crowd in confusion. Nadine followed her as she disappeared into the RV and bus parking lot. Osman was struck square by an ambulance, resulting in 2 broken legs. Rayburn watched calmly as the ambulance crew loaded Osman into the back of the ambulance with another patient. He was amazed that they could fit 2 stretchers in there at once. It had been a long drive here, and he hadn't even had time to fire a single shot. 10 minutes later, Nadine returned. "You lost her." "No. Are you going to tell me what's going on?" "Not until I have a cold beer." As they entered the beer tent, she giggled. Nadine didn't like to giggle, so it seemed a little odd. "Your wife was thrashing around the parking lot trying to find someone to let her into one of the cars. Most of them were empty. Finally, she found a couple guys who apparently agreed to let her hide in their bus. I waved to one of them, and he approached with a smirk on his face. It wasn't what he was expecting, however. My Spanish sucked, but I ended up giving him $800 if he would agree to take Jolin with him when they left." Nadine finished half of the long neck in one gulp. Where were they headed? "I don't know. Didn't ask. But the emblem on the bus said, Diablos de Juarez." We both laughed at that. "By the way, you owe me $800. When we returned, a big red Freightliner was parked outside the motel. Nadine had kept Roger informed of our whereabouts, but she hadn't expected him to show up. I left Nadine and Roger to use the room and found the Deadwood Legends Steakhouse myself. I ordered a large ribeye but couldn't finish it. When I got back, my sister and her husband were still in the room, so I made myself comfortable in the pickup and tried to catch a few moments of sleep. He didn't seem too afraid of her. A knock on the truck window woke me from a light doze. I thought Nadine and Roger were done, but I was wrong. It was a 20-year-old girl dressed like a biker girl. I'm not interested. Go to the truck stop a quarter mile down the road. I'm not a prostitute, damn it. I just want to ask you a question. I think I pissed her off. What? I see you have Virginia plates on your truck. Are you going back there? Yes. I need a ride to Harrisonburg. I groaned and moaned a little, and then climbed out of the truck. I gestured toward the motel dining room and started walking. She picked up her backpack and followed me. Would you like some coffee? I got a nod, but no more than that. As the waitress started to approach the table, she leaned over and whispered, "Can I have a burger too?" I added a large plate of fries to my order and then introduced myself. My name is Rayburn. What's yours? Wanda. Wanda Stiles. How did you get here, Wanda? One of the guys I worked with convinced me that we'd have a great time here at the rally. He might have a great time, but I don't. 2 days on the back of a Goldwing might sound like fun to someone, but not to me. He hasn't even gotten a motel room. I refuse to spend another night in a camping tent. Well, that sucks. It gets even worse. He also claims to have kidnapped your wife. That's it? No! That son of a bitch offered to share me with his new biker buddies. That's when I decided I needed to get out of here. Wanda ate the burger as if she hadn't eaten in days. She also did pretty well with the fries. She wasn't thin, and she wasn't fat. Rather, she resembled a fattened corn farmer. About that time, Nadine and Roger walked in. I introduced them. "Oh, damn, I'm sorry," said Wanda. "I thought you were traveling alone. He'll be right back." Nadine waved a hand at the waitress. "Rayburn, I'm going back with Roger if you don't mind. In fact, I'm going to go with him if you don't mind." She found that amusing. Roger only smiled. Here ends another chapter in Rayburn Watley's life. Nadine and Roger did not return to West Virginia until 3 weeks later. Osmond spent 4 weeks in a hospital in Rapid City. While he was there, his Harley disappeared. No one heard from Jolin again. During the trip home, the relationship between Wanda and Rayburn improved, and as they drove through Indiana, there was a sudden jump, and Wanda recognized his last name. Rayburn Watley was, and still is, a name to be reckoned with in Virginia. Greta teaches Wanda how to make grits.